Oh, hi there. I didn't see you, but I hope you're enjoying LFFD as much as I am. Don't forget, you could be joining us, the Atlas Network team, in person at a regional Liberty Forum or our Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner next year. There are so many amazing places to visit, so many interesting sites to see and people to meet, and our partners have great stories about their experiences. But don't just take my word for it. Let's hear from them now.
Jambo Marafiki, my name is Linda Kavoka from Kenya. I am an international trade lawyer and the director of African programs at Students for Liberty. My favorite moment is from the Liberty Forum 2018, where I contested at the elevator pitch competition. My limits were tested as I competed against the most amazing people from around the world, and I was so excited when I won third place. You definitely want to come to the Africa Liberty Forum next year. The experience you will have is unmatched, from the beautiful people to the culture, the dress and food, and to the amazing stories and conversations you will hear from our free market network. We promise you a breathtaking experience.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm saying good evening because it's night in Asia. Welcome to the Asia Roundtable towards better institutions for economic opportunity. I'm glad to have with me three great people, three stalwarts of the community. Calixto Chikiamco, the president of the Foundation of Economic Freedom, calling in from the Philippines, where they've just had a huge cyclone hit them and Manila is flooded, but we're lucky to have him back over here with us. We have Tricia Yeoh, who is the CEO of the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs in Malaysia, and Dinh Tuanminh, the Research Director for Market Solutions, Research Center for Social and Economic Issues in Vietnam. Welcome, everyone, and welcome and glad to have this panel with us. I'd like each of us to talk for a couple of minutes briefly about what each of our institutions are. Let me start off with the Center for Civil Society. It's a 23-year-old organization based in Mumbai. We focus on three areas of our work. One is the academy, where we have sessions for training young people on what public policy is about. The second is research, where we do work on understanding things better and being able to communicate that out. Our biggest success really in recent times was starting the Indian School of Public Policy, which was started and we're in our second batch. We've also been able to start the National Independent Schools Alliance to champion the case of private budget schools. And it's been an interesting time for us in the COVID days. And I'd like to now pass it on to Calixto to talk about his organization.
Yes, I'm the head of the Foundation for Economic Freedom, which is based here in the Philippines. We're active in policy and legislative advocacy for greater competition, market-oriented reforms, and secure property rights. One of our major focus is really to free the rural land market because we believe we were inspired by Ronald Coase to have to promote freer land markets so that it will go to the highest and best use. In fact, we won the Templeton Award last year for helping to pass a law that removed the restrictions on agricultural land titles.
Fabulous. Tricia?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting. I'm Tricia from Ideas Malaysia. The Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs is an independent think tank based in Kuala Lumpur. We exist to uphold the values of liberty and justice in Malaysia. And our work is premised on the principles of limited government, individual freedom, competitive markets, and rule of law. We've been around for almost 11 years now, celebrating our 11th anniversary in February next year, and I just took over as the CEO. We have been working in promoting free markets throughout the last decade, and I'll talk to you a bit more about the interesting perspectives of our work in the next session.
Super. And Min?
Hello, my name is Min. It's a pleasure to be with you here. I'm the researchers, entrepreneurs, and also translators. Yeah, that's a lot of jobs. So we have small research centers, and what we are doing now is try to promote the market ideas, free market ideas in Vietnam. We do a lot of things from book translations to try to the short course to students, and also consult to the government on various issues, try to deal with try to promote the market solutions in Vietnam economies. So we just try to do something like that.
Thank you, Min. What we're now going to do is each of these organizations are going to talk for a little while, telling us about an interesting initiative that their organization championed to improve inclusive prosperity in their respective countries. Tricia, would you like to get started off first?
All right, sure. Thank you, Louis. So I've really kept everything brief as requested. So we have been working on a project since 2014, trying to investigate and analyze the whole network of what we call GLCs in Malaysia, or what's known as government-linked companies, better known as state-owned enterprises around the world. Essentially trying to map out at the various levels, where they are, whether they're publicly listed at various levels of government, federal and state. And the reason this is important in our belief is that the GLCs in Malaysia actually constitute a very large portion of our economy. And many times they actually compete with the private sector. So we've heard a lot of stories from the private companies themselves where the GLCs buy over companies and then they compete in the very space that the private companies are competing in. And it actually means that they crowd out the private companies, and the government keeps saying that they want to, support the small and medium enterprises, which are supposed to be the backbone of the economy, but yet they actually still perpetuate it. So since 2014, we've been embarking on this big project, and we are continuing that work. GLCs now are more known publicly because of the videos and the infographics and policy papers that we've been doing. We have, increased the public knowledge on the subject, and what we have, I suppose, succeeded to do is that there's a lot of public knowledge now about the need for government-linked companies to divest so that they can reduce their role in business. There's much more questioning and skepticism about the role of GLCs. And apart from the economic implications, there's also the governance implication, where I'm not sure if anyone has heard of this huge case study called the 1MDB, or One Malaysia Development Berhad. It was a GLC in Malaysia, and the Prime Minister, no less, was involved in 1MDB in a huge corruption scandal that spammed, the entire country. It wasted public funds. There were millions of ringgit found in the Prime Minister's account. They used it for political distribution of funds. And eventually, the Prime Minister actually was kicked out in the last general election in 2018. So that was just one example of how poor governance of GLCs, not just from the economic point of view, but also from a governance point of view, can result in poorer outcomes for Malaysia. And so we are continuing our work on GLCs. In fact, we have a grant from Atlas itself to continue this work in 2021 to avoid such cases from happening. So I think I'll stop there.
Tricia, thanks a lot. And I guess it also reflects the importance that Atlas is playing in this part of the world. CCS is so grateful to what Atlas has done. We hear it again from IDEA. Min, would you like to tell us something about what's happening in Vietnam?
Well, thus you may know that Vietnam is a socialist country and is still under the governance of communist parties. So one of our big challenges in Vietnam is how to bring the free market ideas into Vietnam to challenge again the collective ideas that still pervasive in Vietnam. And not like other countries, we still it's not easy to talk some word like freedoms or like democracy, something like this. So what we challenge and we have to do is try to translate the classic books on free market ideas like Mises book, Hayek books, Milton Friedman book, and some recently champions on the liberties, and try to dissimulate these ideas in different form for students or to try to integrate it to the consulting activities so that the government may adjust policy toward the market orientation. So that is what we are try to do. So in that, and now we just try to establish like a virtual libraries that collects and translate and the classic books on free market ideas as well as try to summarize and disseminate the contemporary research experience from other countries that helps the success the lessons on based on the market the free market ideas. That is what we are trying to do and still do in the future.
Thank you, Min. And it just again tells all of us the importance of what it's like to live in a strongly controlled socialist country and the work that you need to do to improve and get the message of freedom. And it's sometimes just basic things of, getting books across, getting access to information across to such people. Thank you, Min. Calixto, would you like to tell us a story about some initiative that you guys have been doing in the Philippines?
Well, aside from land titling and freer rural land markets, one of our projects is to introduce more competition in transport and telecommunications. Because right now, under our constitution, public utilities have to be majority owned by Filipinos. And presently, telecommunications and transport are considered public utilities. And therefore, this has resulted in duopolies and monopolies in those sectors. So the creative way to get around that is to have our friends from the Congress to pass a bill saying that transport and telecommunications are not natural monopolies and therefore are not public utilities. We have succeeded in the sense that our lower house, the Congress, has already passed the bill. And in the Senate, it's going to be considered this January. However, our initiative has been complicated by a fear among our lawmakers that the Chinese will use the law to take over critical infrastructure. So we have had to make some adjustments and put national security provisions in the proposed bill.
Thanks a lot. We're also now going through this interesting period of COVID, and countries like Vietnam have been so successful in controlling the numbers. We've got people from all over the world, starting from the US in the morning, where numbers have been going up significantly. So maybe we could talk for a little while now about what's happening with COVID in our respective countries. And Min, why don't you go? Because I think clearly that's the success story in this part of the world.
Well, yeah, the stories of Vietnam success fighting against the COVID, yeah, from my point of view, maybe yeah, realized on two things. One is the government response. The government is somehow very early and proactively respond against the pandemics. And they do it very decisive and aggressively. Yeah, like when we just have one or two affected cases, during the early pandemics, so the whole village, the whole regions that's isolated, and the other things is that people also just have experience with some other disease before, like Swan virus or H1N1 something like that. So people easily accept like wear mask, or also does accept the guidance from the government. And when the government told people should do something like this, like that, and also even ask the people try to limit their freedoms. So people just easily accept the government requirement. So so I think that these two main things that the contribute for the Vietnam's success.
Thank you. Tricia?
Yes, sure. I think Malaysia has actually gone on its third wave. So we are not containing it very well, unfortunately. But just specifically on how it's impacted my country. So our economy has been really affected. We have a GDP contraction of 17%, just looking at the second quarter. And this is the worst contraction so far since the Asian financial crisis of 1998. So there's, huge unemployment. A lot of small business especially are shutting down and are being affected. And I think one of the problems, I suppose, emerging out of this is that there's a greater expectation of government support. The government already has had a lot of economic stimulus packages that have been passed into law this year and for next year. And I think this dependence on the welfareism and the handouts is something that we really need to discuss and talk about. I don't know whether this is the same expectation that's happening all around the world in any of your countries as well. And the final thing is that, the private sector is suffering greatly. So I think we're just, grappling with what kinds of private sector will survive or will be allowed to survive. And the other thing is again, going back to the GLC question, right? The government is now saying that, okay, the government-linked companies are expected to provide 15,000 jobs and create these 15,000 jobs, which is something that we criticize as well, because you can't create jobs out of thin air, and yet the large majority of the public, that sentiment is that, okay, this is the time that government needs to help people because they're suffering. So we understand that, but at the same time, the expectation of this gross dependency, I feel it's quite damaging for the country in the long run.
Thank you, Tricia. And I think we see a lot of, and I'll talk a bit about how India is a lot similar in a way. Calixto.
Well, the Philippines suffered one of the longest and strictest lockdowns in the world. Yet we came out of it with the worst management of the pandemic. Our cases per capita is highest here in Asia. I think the problem is that the government took a militaristic approach to containing the virus, thinking they could apply containment to an enemy that was invisible. What they forgot was to apply the 3 Ts, which is testing, tracing, and treatment, in order to have smart, you know, measures so as not to damage the economy. So what happened is that now our economy has contracted probably for this year 10%, which is probably one of the highest in Asia.
You know, in India, it's also been a similar situation where I think the bigger hit has been on the economy than on the lives. Our numbers are high in India, but just because the population is high, so everything in India is a high number. But as a percentage of the population, it's not been that bad. But our economy has taken a big hit. We went down year on year in August by nearly 24%. And it's expected that it'll go down on an average by about 9% for the year. And as you know, some of you have talked about the impact on the economy, the impact on jobs, the impact on small and medium scale industries have been a big problem. Yeah, this other interesting thing that happened in India was the migration, where people move from their various locations into back to their homes, where they, you know, from reverse migration happening because of the lockdown. And that sort of caused a lot of economic hardship to a lot of people. So while we were successful in terms of locking down the economy, and I think that really did help in some ways, unlocking the economy is proving to be difficult, because how do you get people to have the confidence to go back and start going back to office? So we're being in this sort of, you know, strange situation where, you know, we've figured out how do we open up the economy. And there are a lot of lessons, because unlike, say, for example, in Vietnam, where you've had experience with a pandemic before, we've really not sort of done something like this in India. People aren't used to wearing masks. So we've still got some time, and I'm just trying to see if there's been any questions that have been asked over here. There aren't any questions. So, you know, we've got about another sort of 7-8 minutes, because you guys have been so disciplined on time. Is there something that you'd like to talk about, which is which, you know, you'd like to share with the listeners over here about you know,
I can go if no one wants to go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I was just going to say that what we've been saying at Ideas, and we've been repeating this, and you know, our budget for next year just came out as well. What we've been saying is that actually Malaysia has had already a lot of its own economic structural problems even prior to the pandemic. So our economy was already not doing well, but the pandemic this year has merely accelerated the whole process. But what we've been saying is that, you know, in a way, don't let a crisis go to waste. Use this opportunity that the country can now take to truly address some of the fundamental problems that we have had in existence already. And some of those things would be, you know, relooking at what we have called, it's a race-based affirmative action policy called the Bumiputra policy, which favors a particular ethnic group because of certain incidents that took place, you know, many, many years ago, and also because that is the majority. So the Bumiputra are the majority ethnic group in Malaysia, but they continue to receive certain economic benefits, which the rest of the population does not believe to be very equitable. So that's one thing. I mean, if they still need to have that because they are still inequitable, you know, they still experience the most number of poverty rates, still there needs to be a clarity on what the purpose of the policy should be and what the time limit is, because it cannot last forever. And then looking at many of the other regulatory problems as well to increase enterprise development. We still have a lot of problems when it comes to very vague policy of public procurement. So essentially, we don't have a rules-based environment. We have the opposite of that. And so we've been saying that use this as a time to really address the fundamentals, because we need every bit that we can get to get out of the pandemic and experience economic growth in the least painful way.
Thank you. Min or Calixto, would you like to go in?
Well, one thing that yeah, maybe I have to give a note on the Vietnam success is that we actually is the somehow afraid of whether this success may give some harmfuls in the futures of Vietnam's economies, because you know that what we are afraid now is that when the government very successful to control the pandemic, so now in Vietnam many people think that the government can do many other things, and so they may postpone the progress of reform in Vietnam in terms of like privatize state enterprise and also marketize the public service sectors, and we still have to make the warning to the government that if we want to have the fruit of this success, so we still have to keep the economic reforms toward the market orientation, to make some countries more free and reduce the government controls on the control and interventions. So this is what we still have a lot of work to have to do during the post-pandemics.
Thank you. And Calixto?
Yeah, well, like Tricia, we believe the situation is, ripe to advance reform, so that the crisis brings an opportunity to push for more market-oriented reforms. One area is, of course, labor market reforms, because with the massive unemployment, I think labor is more open to more reforms that will improve employment rather than just increasing minimum wages. And therefore, that's a project that we have right now, trying to develop ideas that will hopefully be a win-win with a social contract with labor, so that there'll be a freer market in labor, and even maybe special economic employment zones where we can try out these ideas.
Thank you, Calixto. I guess jobs and employment has been the big thing we've talked about. So we've got a minute left. So I'd like each of you to just talk about in one sentence what needs to be done in your country to expand economic freedom in this pandemic environment. Calixto, would you like to go first?
Well, as we've been fighting for, we want liberalization of foreign investment in telecommunications, which the pandemic has shown to be very, very critical as we work from home and there's remote learning.
Tricia?
Yes, I'd say the same thing, to open up the markets, to let the governments, let the industry and enterprises be freer to make the decisions and not make the decisions on their behalf, or think, these are the right sectors for them to invest into. I'll keep it short there.
Min?
Well, what I want to say is that the government should focus in its success and should not expand its powers to economic issues, and still keep reform the state-owned enterprise and thus reduce the regulations on public provisions sectors. So it is the ways to bring the success of the Vietnam economies. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. Thank you, Lindy, for giving us this platform. Min, Tricia, and Calixto, thank you. And well, I guess I pass it on to you. And have a lovely day at the Atlas event. Thanks a lot to Atlas for their support.
Thank you.